This is House Planning Help episode 99. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you want to build new or renovate. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century. My personal goal is to create an energy-efficient home before I turn 40 in August 2016. Coming up in this session, my guest is homeowner Luke Mahon. He tells his story of buying a new developer house that had no insulation in. We'll get to that in a moment. Quick reminder, I don't know how this has happened, but we're very nearly at episode 100, which is a landmark, and I hope you've enjoyed a lot of the episodes that we've sent out there. I've certainly enjoyed putting them together. The website, however, has needed rebranding, relaunching for a long time, so I'm very, very happy that we'll be doing that to coincide with episode 100 and opening up a new part of the website, which is called The Hub. And I'll share more details on what that's all about after today's interview. You might also remember, if you've been listening to most of these podcasts, episode 97, I gave a full update of where I was with my project and had a bit of a moan. The 20-second recap is along these lines. 3 years of learning when actually I really want to be doing more action and progressing and hoping to complete it all in 4 years. We've only put in one bid for a piece of land that we lost. And after that episode was released, almost straight away, we discovered a new plot of land. Getting excited now. It's in one of the villages that we like. So good, tick there. It's big enough for only one house. It's not going to be a huge house. It's very hard to find these plots of land because inevitably the shape means that you can put more houses on, or the position isn't quite right that we don't like. But this is at the end of a lane, so not a lot of traffic going past, yet still central in a village. It's got good internet connection, which is important for me and my business. And we did some research. We met some neighbours who actually were wanting the piece of land for themselves, but they couldn't afford it. And they had quite an accurate idea of what they thought the plot was worth and why, which shocked me because everything that we've looked at, the price has been so much higher, yet this wasn't advertised. So I was getting very, very excited at this point. You know the equation, we've mentioned this before in podcasts: land cost plus build cost plus profit margin of typically 20 to 30% is less than or equal to a house value. And I'm happy to dig into that profit margin a little bit to put in a higher bid as well, because I just want to get into a house. It's a house. We're not looking to invest. This is a home that we're going to be creating. So all of this looked exciting. And then we discovered that it was sealed bids. The sealed bid scenario is a weird one, particularly in this area where I live, which is fairly close to London, prime commuter territory. So I really don't know who I'll be up against or what they will be putting in terms of bids. It's just a mystery. So we've done all the calculations. We have a friend who's an estate agent. If you're listening out in the States, real estate, same sort of thing. So he was able to give some quite accurate forecasts of what the house would be worth, and he knew the area, what similar houses might be worth. And he'd actually moved away from this area very, very recently, so got current input on this, yet not trying to sway either way. That's the hardest thing, isn't it? How do you get a house valued when you know that a lot of the time if you approach people who value properties, they're looking at it in a slightly different way. Anyway, so sealed bids, we're going to take two. We're going to have another go here and put in a bid, and I'll let you know how that goes because we've got to wait another month before we find out whether our offer was good enough. But we're going to go on the high end because it's still a lot less, as we think, our calculations, than a lot of the other plots that we're looking at. So quite excited there. Fingers crossed. Let's get to our featured interview with Luke Mahon. It's slightly unusual for this podcast because this won't directly help you if you're looking to build your own house or retrofit an existing property. And you're probably thinking, why on earth are you doing this? Well, I feel that this brings to the surface a number of issues, and it's all through Luke's experience. So it starts with his individual case, and then it broadens out in this interview. And I must admit, I've been intrigued. I've been following Luke on Twitter for probably 9 months now, looking at his tweets, which have been painful, really, in a weird way, a little bit funny for me too. I hope Luke isn't offended by that. But, so you'll hear this story as it evolves. And I started by asking Luke how he came to buy this house.
So nature of my job means I need to be quite close to Heathrow Airport, and also my wife works in Reading Town Centre. So we looked for a house that sort of satisfied both needs. So I was able to get to Heathrow quite easily, and my wife could still get into Reading. But we also wanted something that was kind of close to the country. We had been looking for ages, and we were actually looking for an older house, and we couldn't find anything. And then we came across this development. It's in just a sweet spot area for us. The size of the house that was available, the very largest house they do, suited our needs, and we really liked the location. So initially we looked at it thinking it would be a nice thing to have as a backup, perhaps. And then we came along and we were quite wooed. We were shown not a property here, but on a similar development nearby at Church Cookham. And we really liked the size of it's not like a typical new build. It's got a very big open plan, very large master bedroom. And it really surprised us. And we thought, well, actually, this seems like a good prospect. The other thing that swayed us is that my wife's grandparents had recently bought a house from the same developer, Taylor Wimpey, up in Cambridge. And they were super satisfied with it, had no problems at all. We'd heard horror stories, but after hearing that, we thought, well, okay, well, that seems like maybe they've got their act together. Then maybe it's something that we should take a leap of faith on, which is why we ended up buying this property.
I want to have a chat with you to see what we can discover about developer housing, what we can learn. And I'm assuming that your story is an extreme case. I'm hoping it is. I
don't know if it is. I think part of the reason why people have heard about my story is because I'm in marketing. I know how to make noise and create publicity. So I created a Twitter account to kind of, create some noise about what was going on. But the only reason I did all of that is because when we moved into the house, we noticed we had a number of issues, which were actually very, very significant. Probably the most significant issue being the fact that we had no insulation in the property whatsoever. Let me stop you there, because that's pretty major. Plus, it's something that you don't necessarily see. No, but we were really, really cold. So we moved in September 26, and it was very cold. The nature of the house that we're in, it's a 3-story house. The top floor is effectively in the eaves of the roof, and that's our master suite. It's a very large room. Big selling point of the house. So we're thrilled to be in there, but after about a month, it started to get cold. We're sort of into October time, and my wife was getting into bed shivering, and you could feel a breeze going across our faces. And my wife actually was in tears at one point, saying, this is ridiculous. We just spent all this money. It wasn't it was a very significant expense, and I'm freezing in my own bed. The whole reason that we like the idea of a new build is that we wouldn't have drafts, we wouldn't be fixing the place up, that it meets all these great regulations. It's going to be super insulated. They actually advertise it as being a grade 3 eco house, I think they call it. So it's effectively insulated to a certain point. So we thought it's going to be lovely and warm, just like my wife's grandparents' house is. But no, we were freezing. So this went on for a while, and my wife was actually in tears about this. And I said, well, let me just check and see what's going on. And there is a small hatch that goes into like a sub-loft almost, where our aerial is. And I had a little nose up there, and there was no insulation up there. So I contacted the developer, Taylor Wimpey, and said, please, can we have a look at this? They came out and said, oh yeah, there's no insulation there. I said, well, can we rectify that? And they came out and they stuffed some insulation in there, still freezing cold. So I said, well, what about the rest of what about the walls in that room that sort of go under the eaves? I don't think there's insulation there. Oh no, there definitely is. There definitely is. Huge fight. After a big fight, they came out, they cut holes. This is going into Christmas last year. And guess what? You could see out to the outside world. There was nothing. It was just plasterboard. So they came out and they sort of stuffed some insulation in there. It was still freezing after that. Shocking things that happened about that. They came out, cut the holes in the walls, stuffed insulation into it, patched the holes up, and then the last working day before Christmas, I still had all these big patches on the walls. I had a big family Christmas thing going on, and I was constantly harassing our customer care support staff here on site, say, look, can someone please come around and paint these walls, because I've got all my family going to be here in a day. And in the end, they came around with a tub of paint and a roller and said, sorry, all the painters have gone home. So I ended up on the last working day for Christmas painting my own walls with a roller, waiting for my family to turn up. Such is the level of customer care when you buy a new house from a developer. That wasn't the only thing, though. No, it wasn't anything at all. In total, when we add it all up, we've had between 400 and 500 snags in total. So it's not insignificant. 400 and 500? Yeah, we started off with about 150, and that grew quite rapidly as we started to discover all sorts of things around the house. So it's a huge list of snags. Now, some are quite minor, so don't cracks on walls and things where plasterboard isn't properly matching and so on. But some of them are very significant. For example, toilets being placed in the wrong place, tiles tiles, wrong tiles being put down. Windows, our bay window had to be removed and replaced because it was put in so badly that it was actually at an angle. We've had doors had to be replaced. We've had walls had to come down. 3 walls in the house had to come down and be rebuilt because they were put in incorrectly or at an angle, or were not properly put in, i.e. didn't have enough studs in them, so they wobbled. So yes, we had wobbly walls. Another issue as well, for example, all the air bricks around the house are either set too low to the ground or are actually underground. We had a number of air bricks which were underground, so that was causing a problem as well. So the house simply didn't meet building regulations. But the snag list was vast. Bear in mind, we moved in on the 26th of September. It's now, the 9th of September? What is it? No, not even. But it's around that time. So we're nearly a year in. We've got through most of the snags. To get to this point, first of all, I was being ignored consistently. So after the incident around Christmas, I thought, I'm being ignored, things aren't getting done. So I created some posters, and I put posters in the window. We're quite close to the show home. And I basically said, this house doesn't meet building regulations, we're being ignored. We sent this long letters to head office. And
can I stop you there? Because how do you know a house meets building regulations? You say but how do you know?
Because we checked the regulations, because we thought this is a problem. Why is this air brick so low? Because what was happening was the air bricks was a good example. They would draw water in when we had a cold night or a damp night, and then it would spit the water out. So when you'd go out to walk around the side of the house, you'd see these splays of water coming out from the air bricks. And I thought, that can't be right. So we checked number of things. We checked building regulation data, and also we checked the NHBC guidelines. Now, it's important to note that these houses are built to NHBC guidelines. The other thing that's really important to note is that the NHBC sign off these properties, not the local building authority.
Individually or just the whole site?
They do come around and inspect the houses individually, but primarily they only inspect the main, what we can gather is they inspect the main show home, and then they do cursory inspections of the other houses. Now, we have got an inspection sheet that we've seen because we applied for it and we got it through, which shows 4 inspections here at this property. It does say that there is, on one of the sheets, that there is a possible customer dissatisfaction issue. Shocking. So obviously they picked up on problems that are here. But it's interesting, I think, that building regulations don't sign off these properties. So the local council, we're in Woking Borough Council, and we all know what it's like. If you self-build or if you're building an extension, you have to go through building regulations. They come out, they inspect, and they won't sign anything off until they've inspected it and they're happy that things have been done. Whereas the NHBC, what we can gather is, and this is when we've taken them to task over this, they'd come out and inspected it. They had noted there was no insulation, and they had said, is insulation going to go into the property? And Taylor Wimpey had effectively just said, yes, we're going to put it in. So effectively, they'd signed the property off on a promise. Can you imagine building regulations or building authority doing that? They'd never do that. So why is it that with these new builds, effectively, they're able to get these things signed off without actually doing anything on the basis of a promise? That's quite scary.
So where did this leave you?
Well, so going back to that point around Christmas, we put these posters up in the window. We knew there were problems with the house, and we'd said at the time that there were like 180 snags, which is all we knew at the time. We obviously uncovered a lot more subsequent to that. We put these posters up, basically just alerting people to the fact that, when they were buying this house, there were clearly some problems here. That created something of a ripple. We got some communication back and forth, but it was all promise. We had just had people sitting, the amount of people I've had sit in my living room promising me the earth. Oh yeah, we'll get this fixed, don't worry, it'll be sorted, it'll be done in 2 weeks, la 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 la. We've had this so many times. So we had a period of that, and then we had some cursory kind of, people coming in, fixing small things here and there, but things just weren't moving at any kind of pace. We had a couple of weeks where just things just, doing very minor things. It was just very slow, and the work wasn't great. So we got more frustrated with this. At that point, I set up a Twitter account, and my Twitter handle is @myhousesucks. Set up that account and just started taking pictures of the problems that we found around the house and posting them on Twitter and saying, this is what it's like to buy a Taylor Wimpey home at Loddon Park. So we kind of post these pictures up. And interestingly, through doing that, we discovered that all the neighbours that we have here in phase 1 had similar problems, if not the same problems. And
is this common, though? I don't really know. I've never been through this process, and that's one of the reasons for doing this interview. But is that what you expect when you get a new house?
You shouldn't have to expect any of this. Now, from what we can gather, when you buy a new house, typically, of course, there are snags. You expect snags. It's a new house. You're going to get small little problems here and there, that, paint issues, little cracks, and you get those fixed. That's what we absolutely expected. Now, it's interesting because when you buy a new house, certainly in our experience, we were not allowed to have the property surveyed. We couldn't have it inspected prior to purchase. So they would not allow, because an active building site, they would not allow any personnel on site to do any kind of inspection prior to completion. Now, what they do, the way they sell this to you, they say, well, it doesn't matter because you've got an NHBC guarantee for 10 years. It's a new house. Any problems that you have, our customer care team are on site and they'll rectify all of that. We do a 7-day inspection, a 28-day inspection, and we'll sort it out. In our experience, that didn't happen. We didn't have a 7-day inspection. We didn't have a 28-day inspection. We had to keep pushing and nagging to have any kind of inspection done. When we we spoke to our customer service rep on site, things weren't happening. When we wrote to the regional office, things didn't happen. We wrote to head office, things didn't happen. It was only when I started the Twitter account that we got a response back from somebody in the marketing team at Ted Wimpey saying, oh, well, let us know. And I said, well, we've already sent you this huge letter of all these problems. And they said, oh, right, okay. And they started to react to it because suddenly it was in the public domain. Suddenly, it was taking their reputation down a notch, and then they got interested. So, and what I found from this is that I wasn't the only one. So a lot of my neighbours here in phase 1 had the same problems. Interestingly, after they discovered that our property had no insulation, they carried on building properties of this type here on this development. They built, I think, another 10 of them with no insulation. So they already knew there was a problem. They already knew that we had no insulation.
Had anyone with no insulation elsewhere discovered it at that stage, or were you number one?
We were number one. Now, what they do, which is really interesting, is they zone down and they deal with you at an individual level. They do not like it if you discuss anything with your neighbors. So they come to you and they say, oh, we're really sorry. It's an isolated incident. We have checked the other properties. They don't suffer from this. And they lie. Because they told us that about this property. They said, we've checked the other properties and they do have insulation. That's their initial finding. And, it's just you, it's an isolated incident. That was a complete barefaced lie. None of the other properties of this type on this phase 1 of this development have insulation. None. Even the ones they developed and built after they discovered that we had no insulation, they carried on building them with no insulation.
Have they explained why, though? To me, obviously, all of the podcasts that we've done are more self-builder. That is just a key component of building a house. So one house, I can't even really... How would you make that mistake?
How do you make the mistake? They have some subcontractors. They had, obviously on site, the site manager. The site manager was let go. So I'm assuming there was an issue with the site manager on site. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know what happened, but obviously they're using subcontractors, and the site manager oversees that. It's the site manager's job to sign off these things as they go through. Clearly, that site manager signed off this property, not just this property, but all the property types like this, without having any insulation in them. So they knowingly built properties with no insulation because they knew that we didn't have it, which is really shocking. I think that's really, really shocking, and even more shocking is that not only was this property signed off by the NHBC, but all of those properties were signed off by the NHBC, and Taylor Wimpey knew that they had no insulation in them because they knew that we had no insulation. Subsequently, once we discovered this, and we've started speaking to our neighbours because we realised that it wasn't an isolated incident, because we actually, we actually talked to our neighbours. Our neighbours are nice people. And we all got together and suddenly we realised that we had common issues. Because lots of other people were cold in their houses. Lots of other people had problems with, issues like holes in the walls that we had here in the conservatory and so on. And we said, oh, well, I've got a similar problem. And so I demanded a thermal survey was conducted here at the property. It took me a while to get that through. They came out, conducted a thermal survey, and discovered that even the remedial work they had done after around Christmas time to try and put some insulation in was completely terrible and wasn't really doing much. And they had to, they brought in surveyor team who discovered that a tremendous amount of work needed to be done to rectify it. And not just on this property, but guess what? Pretty much every single property in the first phase of this development had similar problems, almost every single one. If it wasn't insulation problems, there were other problems with trapped water or condensation or other fundamental issues where things weren't properly vented and so on. The air brick issue is an ongoing issue for everybody around here, having to dig out the ground to uncover buried air bricks and air bricks that are too low to the ground. And bear in mind, this is a brownfield site. This was a landfill, so it's been backfilled after the house has been built too high. So right now they're removing the soil that they put in.
It's not the grass being mown outside. If you can hear a little rumble in the background, they're out there with diggers loading it all up. I must admit, I thought that we're at a stage where you might be happy at the end of this story, but I don't know. We'll bide our time as we get there. So the insulation issue, huge. They've done a little bit. What more can be done?
Well, no, they have now fixed it. So the work that was carried out, and if you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see a picture. It's on my main picture of the house with the roof.
Maybe we can grab a few of these for the show notes as well,
sure.
particularly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I have been following your Twitter account, and it's been an interesting story. But as I say, I think a lot of it is down to you and your marketing position. And I would love to know how some of your neighbours, whether do you think any of them have just thought, oh, well, I'll just live with it?
Well, yes, they have. And also the way that the way that Taylor Wimpey have acted towards it is quite intimidating. So first of all, they try and isolate you and try and make you feel like it's just you. And then they kind of try and make you feel like you're making a lot of fuss. It's like, oh, well, you're being very picky. We kind of get that from them all the time. And actually, I know that we're not. And also, I'm prepared to stand up. I will always stand firm. So everything that I've done, I've always said, no, this is a problem. You need to fix it. Here we are nearly a year on. I'm still fighting that. Even now, I mean, our snag list is down to, I think, about 10 items. It's very, very small. They've told us they've signed the property off, even though we're not happy with the number of items that still need to be fixed. And we've had to fight. I've had to send emails back and forth, phone calls, literally shouting at people. The last email I sent through, I had sent it to Peter Redfern himself. I had to copy in our local MP who's been involved to try and support it, just to get action for them to resolve the last few outstanding items so we can actually have the property that we were supposed to have a year ago. Here we are a year on. And just to underscore how much work has gone into this. So in total, we have had workmen on site over the past year for a total of 14 weeks, actually on site working whilst I'm trying to work from home. So, and I've had to supervise them throughout those 14 weeks because they're all over the place. So I've had that. Then on top of that, we were moved out for a month and put into alternative accommodation. We were put into a small apartment in Reading Town Centre for a month. So in total, it's taken them 18 weeks to get to this point, which I think is longer than it took them to build the house in the first place, just to rectify the problems. It gives you an idea of how significant that is. And that doesn't include the groundworks, which is a further 4 weeks, which is currently going on now. So that's a total of 22 weeks of rectification works that we've had at this property, will be when it's completed. And, this is a new house that was supposed to be handed over to us complete, that was signed off by the NHBC as being complete and being sorted. And the only reason we've had that is because I have fought tooth and nail every step of the way to get that. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have got this work. They would have said, oh no, it's a small isolated incident. Oh no, it's not this, it's not you. And if it wasn't the fact that all our neighbours had similar issues, I don't think we would have got as far as we have, because we effectively uncovered a massive issue here, and the fact that everybody in this first phase was similarly affected. So because we all knew about it, they couldn't deal with this on that individual basis, so that their little plan fell apart. But it's interesting, through Twitter, I've spoken to a lot of people who've had similar problems from other developers, not just Taylor Wimpey, but from Persimmon and so on. Persimmon being quite highly mentioned as well, who have problems with them, who've come back and said, and other Taylor Wimpey sites where they had similar problems. And Taylor Wimpey have done exactly the same thing, or Persimmon have done the same thing and said, oh, it's just you, it's an isolated incident, nobody else affected. And they try and deal with you that way so that you don't speak to your neighbours about it. You don't talk to anyone about it. You just think, okay, it's just me. I'll get it fixed. Everything will be fine. It doesn't affect anybody else. No doubt they've rectified properties on certain developments where their neighbours are similarly affected. And because they haven't complained, because they haven't made noise, they're not being fixed. It's a money-saving initiative.
We're talking big business here. This is one of the UK's big businesses. And I don't have a problem with big businesses if they are delivering things as they should be. And I always get the feeling at the end of this that we need to raise our game. It's a mixture of demand from the public wanting higher standards, which I think you've demonstrated. And then also that stick from the government saying, these are the regulations. Actually, are we meeting them? So,
well, it shocks me, actually, as a consumer. So any other product that you might consume, if you were to buy a car, a television, a computer, whatever it might be, if you have a problem, you speak to the place you bought it from or the manufacturer and say, I've got this problem. And typically they bend over backwards. I work for a large IT company, so I've been in that situation where you have a customer who's made a purchase and there's been a problem, and you do everything you can to ensure that they have a new replacement item or a repaired item. We typically compensate if there's any issues, significant issues, do everything that we can to ensure that we retain the customer. Now, isn't it weird when you buy a house, which is the largest purchase that you make, they work in completely the opposite way. There's no customer support, really. They don't really care about retaining you as a customer. They treat you terribly. They ignore you flatly. You have to fight tooth and nail. The only reason that we've got as far as we have is because of the Twitter account, which led to a Daily Mail front page, which led to BBC being involved, which led to a whole host of other things. Because of that negative publicity, Taylor Wimpey have reacted. If we hadn't had that publicity, they wouldn't have reacted. And that's pretty obvious.
Here's a good point then to ask you about the alternative route, because I know for this house, you told me before how much you spent on it. It's a similar budget to what I want to spend on my self-build, which I'm struggling to find land to begin with.
There you go. Now, we would have considered a self-build, and we're a big fan of self-build. We love grand designs, and we sit there and think, wouldn't it be great to build our own property, have it designed exactly as we want it? And that would be fantastic. The problem is you can't find the land. And certainly in the areas that we've looked, we couldn't find land around here that would have been suitable for us to do that. And obviously, it's quite a daunting task anyway. There's not as much support. It's much easier to walk into a new build because it's done for you. But when you do it, you think you do it with the knowledge of the fact that this is all built to specific regulations, that you've got the NHBC backing you up, supporting it, you've got the 10-year guarantee. What could possibly go wrong? Whereas if you self-build, well, there's all kinds of problems that could happen. Things could go wrong along the way. You get let down by suppliers. You're having to project manage it and so on. So it seemed like a much easier route. In reality, here we are a year on, we're still finishing building our property. If we'd been able to find a plot of land, the reality is it probably would have taken the same amount of time to build our own property, and we'd have a beautiful house we designed to our own specification. But think about where we are today, and this is something that's become really obvious to me. The problem is the large house builders effectively get all the land. So if I look around this area right now, there's a number of sites around us. Woking Borough Council are having this huge spree of building going on right now. It suits them brilliantly because guess what? Lots more council tax. I'm sure they're doing very well out of it. So they've given the land out to, who is it? Oh, it's Persimmon. Oh, it's Taylor Wimpey. Oh, it's Barrett. Oh, it's Bewley. It's all the same big house builders. Red Rose, the other one as well. So that's all that they've got them up. So you can't get land because all the land's going to the large developers. And then the large developers are building the houses, which are not being signed off by Woking Borough Council. They're being signed off by the NHBC. And who funds the NHBC? Oh, it's the large house builders. So it's all incredibly self-serving and really quite bizarre because it feels like it's an industry which is corrupt at its core. And they've effectively stifling the smaller house builders, the self-builders. And I understand that we need more houses, that we have a housing crisis. And I agree we should be building more, but we should be building them to an appropriate standard. I don't understand why the government isn't fixing it. Why is the NHBC, which is effectively funded by the house builders, allowed to sign off all these properties, which are being signed off effectively, without meeting regulations? Why aren't building control for the councils that are giving away this land or selling this land off, signing off these properties? I don't understand.
Just as you were saying that last bit, I was thinking, are you angry or are you passionate about this? Is there anything else? Let's say all your issues have gone, everything's sorted. What happens then? Do you just step away from this?
I don't think I can. Having gone through this process, I mean, you ask me if I'm angry. I'm so far beyond angry now. I was angry probably a few months ago. I'm beyond that. I'm dispassionate about it now because it's taken so long. It's become part of my life, as terrible as that is. What annoys me is I kind of feel like I've uncovered a much bigger issue, and it feels like that's not right. So why should other people have to go through the same process? And why should we have this situation? We don't have this situation in other countries. In Germany, we'd never have this situation. In France, you wouldn't have this situation. So why is it in the UK that we're beholden by these large companies who snap up all the land, build these substandard properties, get them signed off by a body that they're paying for to sign them off, that don't meet regulations, and that's all fine. We're okay with that. We shouldn't be okay with that. We absolutely shouldn't be okay with that. Someone should stand up and say this is wrong. And I'm happy to be that person if that's what it takes, because I know what it's like to be on the bad side of that. I know what it's like to go through this process.
Someone facing this right now, perhaps they'd had that thought of maybe self-building, but it's the easier route of going down here. Is there anything you can say to them to protect them or make them go into this and be able to come out the other side at least pleased with what they've got? Or is it just too complex?
Don't give up is all I can say. So if you're in the same situation that we found ourselves in, don't listen to a developer when they say you're being fussy, that it's an isolated incident, that it's just you.
But even before that stage, when they just begin,
there's very little you can do. Because what we found when we bought this property, we weren't able to have this property inspected. I mean, Taylor Wimpey was flatly refused to allow anybody on site, it's an active building site, before completion. I mean, we just absolutely could not have this place surveyed. We asked if we could, and we were told no. They said you can get a snagging survey once you've completed. And that's full completion. So all our money's gone. We've paid for the house, and it's not an inexpensive property. So we paid for it all, and now we can inspect it. But they said, but it's okay. You've got customer care on site, we'll rectify any issues for you, we'll do the 7-day snagging, the 28-day snagging, you've got a 10-year guarantee. So you feel like you're protected. And the 10-year guarantee, we've discovered, doesn't really mean anything because it's from NHBC. It's probably not worth the paper it's printed on. And then the customer care support is so poor that they wear you down to a point that you end up giving up, which I think is a money-saving initiative on their side. They're just trying not to do the work because it costs them money. So they wear you down and wear you down and wear you down to the point that you think, I'm going to give up. Many a time I've thought, I'm going to give up. I've had enough of this. And I've fought through it and said, no, we want the house that we paid for. Let's get it finished. And it's been a really, really tough struggle to get to this point. And you might think, oh, well, it's okay. I'll get appropriately compensated. I doubt that very much. Certainly Taylor Wimpey have not spoken to us about any level of compensation. Having spoken to legal representation, they're saying that there is potential compensation, but it's going to be very, very, very small. We're not going to see a lot of compensation for a year of our lives being destroyed, which is shocking, really, isn't it?
How do you feel in this home? Maybe as we get towards the end of this interview, when it's all completed, is it going to feel like home?
The house, actually, to be fair, we do really like the house. We wouldn't have bought the house if we didn't like the design of the house, if we didn't like, there's a lot of space, a lot of light. It doesn't feel like a regular new build house in this property. So we really like it. We've got a good sized garden. We love the fact that we back onto natural parkland, that nobody can build around us. We really love the location. And actually, throughout all this kind of arduous year of hell, we've really built a really nice community here within this first phase because we've all got to know each other as neighbours, and there's a really great community of people here. So because of that, it actually does feel like home. We've got fabulous neighbours. The house itself, when it's finished, is going to be fantastic. And it is so close to being perfect now. There's a few minor things and then it's done. And then I think we'll be very, very happy here. We're not planning on moving for a long time. So, I think we'll be very happy long term. So yeah, there is a happy ending here. When we get to it, the house will be finished. We'll be happy. We can get on and live our lives. It's just taken a year to get to that point. So.
That seems like a good ending. Luke, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So what did you make of that? Anyway, check out a handful of photos that he sent our way to put into the show notes. houseplanninghelp.com/99. We've got a transcript of our conversation and there are links to Luke on Twitter. I'm sure he would be happy to answer any of your questions either there or we can bring him back if you put a question into the show notes. But I hope that Luke stays in this area of housing. I don't know why. I'd like him to. I feel he's had this terrible experience. Yeah, he's come through it with something. I'm not quite sure I found that really, really interesting, and I'd love to know your thoughts. houseplanninghelp.com/99. So before we finish up today, I wanted to remind you, episode 100 coming up, and we're just about to not only relaunch the website, but open the hub. If you don't know what this is all about, let me fill you in on where we're at. So the idea is that we're going to have a premium section of the website for those that want to go a little bit further. And I always feel that with my media background, I have an unfair advantage of being able to create video. And I've been working with Mike Coe as well, who was in episode 54, if you go back into the archives, lives in a fantastic autonomous house himself. So he's been doing a lot of the filming down at Long Barrow, which is a case study that we've had Alex Baines. We started this about 9 months ago, filming on site there, and it's been fascinating to watch some of the challenges that they've had as they've gone through this. So in the hub, we're going to be releasing parts of this story. Obviously, we're operating in a slight time delay, but that's good. So we launch and we know that we've got lots of interesting videos to send your way that hopefully can allow you to get on site without actually having to get on site. There's a second side of the hub that's really important, and that is a learning zone. And each month we're going to release a new module. It's going to be sparse in there to begin with. I will tell you that right now. But we're going to be bringing together people who have that similar goal. They want to create an energy efficient home. We have to start it this way in a particular place, unfortunately. I'd love to make it relevant all over the world, but there's no way that we can do that. So typically my biggest audience is in the UK, and then it goes US, Australia. So if we get to a point where it's successful with the UK side of things, then I would love to take it out to the States and hire some people out there to help me create a similar resource. So for now, this will be very much about if you're someone who wants to build a house, maybe you've only just started, perfect. Or maybe you're some way into the process and you like some more ideas, or this is an opportunity to get in there and chat with other people who are doing this. So I will personally be working very closely with the founder members to improve the experience over time. And if you join at a later date, it will be a lot more developed. So it's a yearly membership. I want to make sure that you get as much value out of it as possible. That's why I didn't want to do a monthly one, because I don't think we can achieve anything over a month. However, yearly, I'm sure you'll get to the end of the year, and particularly for our price points, hopefully it will be a no-brainer just to sign up again. So that's a little insight. We'll go into more details next time as we celebrate episode 100. We'll also be having a chat to Alex Baines. He is the man who is pushing forward the Project Long Barrow that we've talked about. We've chatted to him before, and that was when it was just a patch of grass. It's come a long way since then. It's not complete. There have been some ups and downs, and we'll find out about them next time. Thank you very much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.